Hello and welcome back to the Cyber Made Human podcast, episode 3. I'm your host, Alice Violet. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have had a few technical issues in episode 1 and 2 because it turns out going from behind the scenes to also running everything and hosting the show is a lot to navigate. So we've got some behind the scenes help today from actually my mum. So hopefully this will all go smoothly. Do make sure to subscribe because we've got some amazing content and really interesting guests coming up for the rest of the year. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Adam Bolas. Hello, Adam from Digital
Hi.
Woof and a newly launched second company.
Yeah, in Cinto. Yeah. No, it's exciting stuff. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So we've known each other, now for about a year?
It's been about a year. Yeah, bless you. But it's went quick.
It's gone quick.
Really quickly.
Yes. And lots has changed actually over that year for both of us, I would say.
Yeah, I was a lot more immature when I met you.
You were.
A lot of growth. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but it's been a lot of learning and a lot of fun times as well.
Yes.
So it's good.
So you work with child safety primarily online. So you work with schools and also parents, but also with children themselves. And we'll get into exactly what your business does a bit later on. But first of all, I just wanted to touch on some legislation that's changed, which is holding social media platforms accountable for the content that is on there. That's quite a big change, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it should have happened a lot sooner.
Right.
So originally there was the online harms white paper that came out in around 2018, 2019 time. And that was a very, very ambitious.
What was it called? Harms white paper?
The online harms white
right,
paper.
okay.
It was really ambitious. They were looking to go so far as to prosecute directors personally of these sorts of companies if they didn't actually act on online harm. But there was a lot of scope that needs to be defined and everything. And after, COVID happened and then, Ukraine kicking off as well. And now, unfortunately, we're seeing scenes out of the Middle East as well. There's been so much going on that it's been kind of tucked to the back a little bit.
Right.
And then they've had to navigate the whole technological side with the social side to understand how this is really going to work.
Yeah.
And it's kind of been watered down now, unfortunately. But it's still got some strength to it in terms of identifying, classifying, and actually removing harmful content. But it's going to be interesting to see what's deemed as harmful.
Yeah, because I think when it comes to holding the platforms themselves accountable, for example, like TikTok is a big one that was mentioned in this change. How does that actually work? Because is it a case of they should be flagging the content, they should be having a process in place that if a child sees it or a parent sees it and reports it, that it's removed within a certain amount of time, and if not, then the individual can sue the platform? Like, what is this actually going to look like in real terms, do you think?
It's interesting when you mentioned about suing, because I think it was when Gary Lineker was talking about the boats coming across the channel. He then went to, I think some people were saying, like, making false accusations about the guy. So suing's an interesting one. I don't know a whole amount about the individual suing the platform side of things. I'm sure that's in there somewhere, so you're more than happy to take a look.
Maybe it's like if they don't do it, then they get fined from the governments?
Yeah, so platforms have to, so they'll be regulated by Ofcom.
I see.
And they'll have to report their findings to Ofcom. So they'll need to be able to substantiate reports that show what is harmful, like the rates of harm, classifying it, and then also show that they've taken action to remove those types of content that are causing harm. If they don't, then they'll be fined and they'll have damages come their way from the UK government. And I know the EU and the US are both looking at similar legislation. They're quite different in terms of their approach and what they're looking at in particular.
So on the subject of TikTok, I know that it's had a lot of heat and a lot of kind of criticism for the amount of data that it hoovers up of users. It surprises me because with the kind of Cambridge Analytica scandal with Facebook, which is now Meta, and all these kind of stories that have happened historically, why is the focus now on TikTok being worse than the other platforms? Well,
we've got flaring tensions between the West and the East in terms of, like geopolitics and economics and technology and who's going to be dominant in that area. It's really interesting stuff. But, X, formerly Twitter, got a lot of flack when it, was purchased by Elon Musk and it decided to go and do its thing where it changed how it works. And that's in the same kind of limelight as TikTok now, which is interesting because it's you've got a lot of different perspectives and players around the game. But I remember when I was growing up, I hated Facebook just as much as I I am not a fan of the way TikTok operates with its data. So it depends on your perspective and who's telling you what and why. And you know, it's, for me, I second guess everything. So whenever someone tells me something or I read something on the news, I'm like straight away, okay, let's Google this. Let's have a look and see what are other people saying, because then you get the whole picture. So it's an interesting one.
And I guess maybe it's because TikTok was kind of historically known as a children's platform. Now it's much more mainstream, but when it was first launched, it was mostly children that were using it, wasn't it?
Yeah, I remember seeing it in my mum's kitchen down in Cornwall. I saw an advert for the app for the first time, and it was young girls dancing, and I was like, what the hell is this? I was like, no. I like, there's no interest from me like to download this in the slightest. But then it evolved into TikTok because it was called something else.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it was. I think the company was absorbed by a bigger company, which is now ByteDance, that owns TikTok.
But why is there so much more focus on TikTok as a platform that's hoovering up data and that being a concern versus all these other platforms that have always done that?
So it's a multitude of factors in terms of, I'd say the two primary factors in this is the economic factor and the data factor. So, you know, if I ran TikTok, I could paint a picture of everybody that uses it, because the data collection is so precise and it's so intricate. And it's bloody well impressive how they do it. But they take, you know, not just like, you know, how long you sit looking at a reel or how many times you look at the reel, but then like how quickly are you using your keystrokes in and outside of the app? Like how quickly do you type? What are you typing?
And so it's also tracking your data beyond using TikTok. So in the terms and conditions, perhaps that's what people are worried about, is that it's actually that when you're not even using TikTok, it's tracking your banking data, your search history, your location.
I mean, yeah, they all kind of do it. But as I said before, it depends on the side of the line you're on.
Right.
So, you know, if you live in Britain, it's very different to living in China. There's a very different culture. It's a very different society. It's also a very different theology and ideology.
Do they even have TikTok in China?
Yeah, of course they do.
They don't have Facebook or Twitter?
No, because it's Western.
Right.
But it's TikTok's very educational over there. It's like if you go on TikTok, you'll be fed like Pythagoras theorem and like how to build a model rocket and all that kind of stuff. Over here, you get fed like dance videos and absolute rubbish.
But doesn't that depend on your algorithm?
It does, but predominantly in China, it's much more educational, which is great. It's a great endeavor to educate your own people into succeeding and being the best they can be. I love that. But when it comes to using it as a tool to kind of keep other potential competitors in the geopolitical realm less informed, should I say?
I see.
It's a really good tool.
It's like a distraction tool.
Yeah, and also like, but not just from geopolitical level, like from an economic level, you've got like, you know, TikTok's a massive moneymaker. Besides from collecting and selling data, they've got a shop inside that thing. Like, and you've got young people that go on there and produce, you know, they become influencers and what have you, or they're from business. And then they're, you know, producing their own products and selling them through TikTok, which brings in more money, which then goes directly to suppliers that are based in China. So it's just a massive moneymaker, which again is really, really clever. But those two standpoints are probably some of the biggest deals. But the concern from the Western point in terms of the political perspective and the social perspective as well is that, you know, China's becoming a very strong competitor. You know, they've got more ships in their navy than the United States does now. Their economy is predicted to overtake the United States within this decade. When you have a competitor that can hoover up the data of all of your people, including like internet history and all that kind of jazz, it becomes a little bit concerning.
I remember when I worked at Naked Security and we covered a story about FaceApp, I think it was, which is just a photo editing app where you can make yourself look more fantastic. I have ever been guilty of using it. And it basically, the terms and conditions said that you gave the app irrevocable rights to your images to use anywhere they want for any company that they then merge into, get bought by. So if you were sitting on the sofa, say on a Saturday afternoon thinking, oh, I wonder how I'd look with pink hair or whatever, and taking ugly selfies, those pictures are now in this database.
So Digital Wolf recently did a blog on T's and C's.
Okay.
And we rated the complexity and how long it would take an adult to look through the different T's and C's. And I think I can't remember if they were worst or the best, so check it out. OnlyFans, I think it was either like 45 minutes or it was 4 minutes. It was more the two. There was extremes between different apps and how long it would take you to read through them. But yeah, with FaceApp, it's interesting. I think it was FaceApp because there were concerns around like it being a Russian app and stuff like that as well. I remember the rumors.
So I just checked and it was FaceApp, and that was back in 2019, but it was saying that basically you grant them complete irrevocable access to your images that you take or alter. And also I wonder whether a lot of that data, some of the reason that companies like that might be taking it is so that they can actually use that to feed their AI. You obviously need loads of pictures of faces to be able to build AI. So that would be a way of accumulating loads of data.
Yeah, so it's because it's constantly relearning, right? It's like having a puppy and you train it to play fetch, and then you have a machine throw the ball for you and pick it up from the puppy. So you just kind of automate it and it keeps going. And then eventually that puppy's going to be like Olympic level fetch, champion. But yeah, so with us, like, we collect data in terms of our AI to constantly learn as it goes, because with language, it's complicated because it's people, and people change and cultures change and societies change. So it has to keep learning as it goes. In terms of because we touched on FaceApp.
Yeah.
And in terms of data collection, when GPT came out, everyone was like, oh my God, this is going to save me so much time. It's great. I'm going to run all my confidential information through this thing so it can write me stuff quickly. But it's not the input that they own, it's the output they own, because they built it for you. So it's like, if I go to you and I'm like, oh, Alice, can you make me this amazing podcast because I know you're really good at it?
Thank you.
Obviously. Until I pay you, or if there's a contract in place that says, once I pay you, I have the IP. You own it because you produced it, right? It's the same with them. They've produced it, so they own it. They're not going to come after you and sue you if you put it on your website, but they can use it to then retrain their model to make it better.
That's interesting though, because with the Adobe Creative Cloud, for example, like this podcast, I've recorded it on here. I'm using their software to record it, but I'm going to edit it and I own that intellectual property. That is my podcast. Or if, for example, I took a photo and I edit it in Photoshop, that is still mine. So why is that not the case with GPT?
Because that's their individual terms of service. Right. So like with Adobe, I'm presuming it's different. I've never used the software and I remember the T's and C's. So I
never used Adobe?
Well, I use XD. Which is apparently lame because Figma's the cool kid in town. But I don't really use Adobe, so I don't know, fine. To be honest.
Fine.
Yeah, sorry to break your heart. But Bard was really interesting, Google's Bard.
What's Google's Bard then? I don't know that.
It's their GPT.
Oh, right.
So what we have now today in terms of Bard was, according to insiders and whistleblowers, it was built 2 years ago. It was ready to go on the market. But there was concerns around its safety, so they didn't do it. But then GPT came out, and Google, obviously as the search engine giant of the world, was like, we kind of need to do this now because we've been forced to, because our competitors opened up something that's absolutely amazing. So they released it. And in terms of quality assurance, I think it was last week or the week before, there was some tweets came out on X that showed that people's conversations with Bard were being shared. So with GPT, you can share a conversation to a colleague or a friend or something and be like, okay, this is what I've had. This was really useful. Here you go. It will save you a ton of time. But with Bard, when you shared it, Google would automatically index it in the search engine. If you were alone at home and you had a down night and you thought, I'm going to tell Bard to be a little therapist for a second.
Right.
And I were like, I'm having a really tough time with this. What do you recommend so I can feel a little bit better? Or how should I approach this so I can be a bit more mindful about it? That conversation would then be indexed on Google. So they fixed that really quickly when everyone found out.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, they fixed it.
I mean, something that I want to do a whole episode on, but we can touch on very briefly now, is about intellectual property rights with AI. Because something that I think is being completely overlooked, which is very similar to what we've seen with cybersecurity, is that employees don't really think about the implications of what they're doing. They sort of think, oh, that's for someone else to think about. And there hasn't really been a conversation about, if I worked in marketing, for example, and I decide that I've got a presentation on Friday which I haven't prepared for, and I think, oh god, let me just put it into ChatGPT and ask them to make me a presentation. If I put in private client data, for example, so these are their financial predictions for the next year, is that client's private data now in the data set which is feeding the AI? Probably. And I just feel like this isn't being discussed in kind of what the implication is of what you're feeding into these engines. And I know that some of them are private environments where you'd put your data in there and that's owned by your company, and whatever comes out is owned by your company. But they'd cost a lot of money, and there'd be a whole induction process to that. Whereas someone privately downloading ChatGPT or using the free version of it isn't necessarily checking with their manager, am I uploading private data to the public sphere, basically?
Yeah, basically. Well, the thing is, the mainstream conversation's wrong in this sense. you go on the news or on social media, it's like, oh my god, Terminator's just around the corner, GPT's going to kill me because I told it, to get lost, and put it politely. But it should be around the more intricate side of it. When you said about IP, it's kind of like cybersecurity. It's going to be a really boring topic for employees to discuss.
Not boring.
For but for like your average social media manager or something like that, they're not going to be like, I hate two-factor authentication personally, but it's invaluable. It's intrinsic to what you do, because without it, you're kind of setting yourself up to be destroyed. So when it comes to like intellectual property, it depends on the use case and the person as well, and the business. But if I had an employee that was feeding confidential code that was developed for our AI into GPT, I don't think I'd be super happy.
No, but there's not any conversation about that.
No.
And I think obviously the solution is education and people knowing about it. But I don't even think employers necessarily know whether this is an issue yet.
Well, no, because when GPT came out, like there was a lot of it, like I heard it from everyone. Every employer was like, "Oh, we should use AI. We should use AI in some way. We don't know how. We don't know how it works, and we don't know why, but we should use it because it's a buzzword." But the thing is, if like GPT, everyone knows kind of what it is now. But business owners.
So for anyone who doesn't know,
Yes.
who's watching this show, can you just explain ChatGPT?
Yeah, so it's like the best assistant you could ever have. Like it's essentially like a really good assistant. Not being technical about it, like you can ask it anything, and it's meant to leverage the best of humanity to find you the most appropriate answer based on what you're wanting. Like, so if it was like, I've got a lettuce and some cheese and a bit of ham in my fridge, but I've got no bread, what can I have like to eat? It will try and find you a recipe based on that. To something like, I need to write a code out for this website, can you do it? And it's like, yeah, sure. And it'll just do it for you in no time. So that's how it works. But but business owners are prizing efficiency and speed and quality output, which fair play, you should, over IP privacy, which when it comes to like dealing with, your secret, let's put it in the case of like, you're building an app, your secret little baby that you love to bits that you don't want anyone else to steal from you, because you wouldn't just hand it to your mate if he's a brilliant guy but you don't know him. That's where it gets a bit lost.
This is the thing. There's so much potential here. Like, there's so many ways that you can use it for your benefit, but there's so many considerations that need to happen as well. Like, I think the problem is that it's using a data set of existing content on Google, for example, to feed the answer that it gives you based on what's in your fridge. And if 70 people put in some rubbish, poisonous recipe, it might actually present that to you because that's data that's in it. It doesn't discern what's accurate, what's correct, what's healthy. That's the problem. It doesn't have all those things. But we need to change direction, I'm afraid, because this isn't the episode on AI. So it'd be really good for our listeners, for anyone who's not familiar with you yet, to just have a little bit of information about your business.
Yeah, so what I do is I run in Cinto. So it's an AI-based company that's designed to interpret language and harmful content. So essentially what it does is it will take a web page or an email or a Slack message or whatever, and it'll look at the sentence and the meaning behind it. So if you have something like, you're an aubergine emoji, go and knife emoji, arm emoji, it'll interpret that as, you're a penis, go and, hurt yourself.
Thanks for that example.
It's okay. It's a really clicky one. So it's designed to interpret hidden meanings. So in comparison to like a keyword filter, where it's like looking for the obvious ones, which I'm not going to say, it's designed to go a step further to really understand it. Because then if you've got a child or a vulnerable person, or just an adult in a vulnerable position, they're having a tough time, and they see something online that's just the trigger to set them over the edge and do something silly to hurt themselves, we can detect that in real time and then prevent the access to it. So
you can prevent access to it on social media apps?
Yeah, so like if TikTok really loved me and came over and said, hey, Adam, would love to use Incinta.
Oh, I see. So the platforms themselves would have to create it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So like a school could plug it into the network and use it, and it would just go. Or a workplace could put a Slack plugin into their workspace, and it will just go as well.
Okay, and then Digital Worth, which I love. Talk us through that.
Yeah, so it's a CIC.
Which is, we don't do acronyms.
Sorry, my bad. Community interest company. So it's a hybrid between a charity and a business, like 75% charity. So the majority of the profits have to go back into the community. They have to benefit people that are using it, and it has to do good. That's the whole premise of it. There's a lot more regulation to ensure that companies like that are actually doing what they said they're going to do, which is great. But Digital Wolf is mainly around education, but it's designed to make it accessible. So instead of you getting like a A4 piece of paper that says, do and do not do all this stuff, like don't send nudes online, that kind of basic stuff. We go a step further and we're like, okay, we'll approach it in the sense of like, should you send nudes? Like, emoji face, like, and then it'll go into like, well, this is probably why you shouldn't do it, but you need to be comfortable if you are going to do it.
Right.
And make sure you're removing all the personal indicators. So like, don't take it near a window where you've got your street sign outside, because some guy or gal online could pick that picture up and track you down. So it's making sure you're safe when you do it. Kind of like using a seatbelt, where like if you're going to drive a car, you do it safely.
Yes, okay. Well, that's really good. So you're giving people the context rather than just saying, no, don't do something, it's bad. This is why it's bad. If you're going to do it anyway, at least do it safely.
Yeah, if you want to do something, you're probably going to go do it.
Right.
Especially kids. They're not going to think of the consequences. But you shouldn't speak to them, like you shouldn't look down and speak to them. Because when I was a kid, I just wanted equal respect.
And so with the app, Digital Wolf, then, there's two sides to it, isn't there? So schools and parents can use it, and then children can use it as well.
Yeah, anyone can use Digital Wolf. We've got an academy that gets updated like weekly. Like, if there's been a new feature released on Snapchat, like the My AI thing, that a lot of kids actually find creepy because they can't delete it. It's stuck there.
Okay, so what's that? I don't know.
It's meant to be an AI best friend. Going back to our ChatGPT discussion around sharing stuff and who owns it.
Right.
If a little girl's having a really tough time because she's going through a lot when she's growing up, and she, turns around to My AI and goes, I'm going through this and going through that. It's a lot of personal stuff that she wouldn't want to share with anyone, but she feels safe because maybe she's been bullied.
And it's on her phone. She just thinks it's
maybe
private.
She's having a tough time at home. But that's the thing. It's in your phone, isn't it? You think, it's in my pocket, it's safe, it's fine.
Right.
It's not.
And so what happens to that data?
Well, so My AI is I don't know a huge amount, but I know it's a language model. It's similar to GPT. So I'm presuming that it's an open AI powered thing. So the terms of service around data privacy and all that kind of stuff and data use will be very much the same as using, the usual GPT. But, when a feature like My AI gets released or Ghost Trails gets updated, where people can follow you on the map.
Gosh.
Yeah, that's a thing on Snapchat. Did you not know that? It's been out for ages. Yeah.
Ghost Trails.
We do a thing in the Snapchat guide where we're like, Ghost Trails, what are they and how to turn them off? Because if you've got there was, and this isn't exactly the nicest subject, and you can cut this out if you want, but when I was speaking with the Children's Society about a year ago, there was gangs using Ghost Trails to track children to make sure they were taking the drugs to the right place and sex and stuff like that as well. They were just making sure that the parcels were delivered because that's how they view it. So we teach kids and parents and carers.
The parcels.
Yeah, because that's literally how they view it. So we teach them how to turn these things off, because even if you're in that situation, it's never too late.
It's difficult though, because I guess as a parent, and this is the difficulty with children's safety online, is that it veers quite quickly into very scary territory. And as a parent, you would go into sort of like fight or flight mode where you're not really taking in the information. You think, I just don't want my kid using Snapchat.
Yep.
And that's the problem, because then the child is going to use Snapchat, but either with a phone that they don't know you've got, or they're going to hide it from you. So really, you need to be aware of all this stuff and use it with the information. But that's really tough, because parents must shut down when you start saying stuff like that.
Well, no, because we keep it really simple.
Because also with those apps, with location trackers, there's pros and cons to them. Because as a parent, you might be thinking, I want a location tracker on my child's phone. Is there like a safe way that they can do it that isn't
get
a
Life
third-party app?
360. So I use it. So when I got a motorbike, my parents worried, about me being on a motorbike. Fair enough, rightly so. So we got Life 360. It's a free app, and then I'm not selling Life 360, by the way. It sounds like I am. I'm selling my own stuff.
Not sponsored.
I wish, and they could see me on the map safely.
I
where I was.
see.
Whereas with Snapchat, you can just turn it off. Like with Apple, I know it's really easy. You can just go ask app not to track, right? And it makes it nice and easy. But with Android, you can just go into your settings and turn it off. But the guides that we release tell you how to do all of that step by step, because it's designed to be really simple. If the guides don't answer any questions that you specifically got, you can just jump onto our safeguarding assistant, ask it, and go, it's a language model.
And is Digital Wolf free?
No, so it's 99p a month.
Okay.
That's it. Because we need it to be
So
really, really accessible. So you can just go like, I just read the Snapchat guides and it answered all these great things, but I've got this question. What is it? And then it'll go, okay, here's how you do it. And break it down really
Okay,
simply.
that's good.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So it's designed to just be on the spot when you need it. use it.
And I'd love to know your background then. What made you want to get into children's safety online?
So I grew up in a very techie household with my brothers, because they were really into it when I was little, and I grew up with it. So I grew up like building computers and breaking them apart. The really old ones that you'd like, pinch from the school when they're going to throw it out. And then was doing like some software development when I was a kid. One thing my dad didn't let me have when I was a child was a webcam, for good reason, because back then webcams weren't in everything. They were separate. You have to buy it. Coming from a low income household, like, no, I'm not paying for a webcam. Who's going to use it?
Yeah.
So when I had a stranger approach me on MSN, I loved MSN.
I loved MSN.
It was like a 6 or 7 year old asking me, like trying to get to know me, and then, me being a kid, and then they're like, oh, do you want to jump on webcam, take your top off? And I was like, no, block. But now kids are like constantly on it. It's a webcam everywhere you go. There's a microphone everywhere you go. It's always with you. But kids are so like open about it, so confident. Like, you go on TikTok or Instagram Reels and you'll see like these Omegle videos where there's kids literally on Omegle.
What's that?
It's this anonymous video calling app. So you jump in, you click start, and then you get matched with a stranger. There's a lot of penises on there. There's a lot, yeah. But yeah, so kids go on that, literally just match with random.
So really, that shouldn't be a children's app. That should be 18 plus. There's no world in which children should be matched with strangers online. And so, is it an over 18s app? It should be.
I think it's 13.
I think
plus.
that's something that, as a parent, you could kind of say, yeah, I'm gonna say that you could be on Snapchat and message your friends, but perhaps not. Whatever.
Also, like called. OnlyFans, you don't have to prove your ID to get OnlyFans.
Right, but OnlyFans is a porn site. Yeah. So if you're going on there, you're not going on there and accidentally seeing a naked man.
Also, basically.
Okay, fine. I thought it was something that children were using.
It is something that children are using. They go on to chat to random strangers. There's a lot of trends around it, so it became really trendy with TikTok, where you'd have like influencers pull pranks on strangers on it. And a lot of kids would come on to freak the kids out, get a few laughs, get a few likes, and they build their subscription base from there. But like kids going on there, like there's clips I've seen on Reels where like there was one where it was his camera or her camera was black, like you couldn't see anything. There was 2 girls there. And then he just put, because there's a chat box next to the videos, and he just put their longitude, latitude, and their IP address. So he knew who they were within like 5-10 seconds, because they were like, is it working? And he had them. Or she had them. So there's a real risk there.
So why is that then? So in a lot of apps, like on Facebook and with WhatsApp and stuff, everything's encrypted. And so unless I literally shared my location with you, if I sent an image with you, for example, the metadata would be removed. On this app then, just by logging on, you can see my geolocation.
Yeah, because they just track you down. Because like unless you're encrypted in transit, everything you do online will come back to your trail. You leave footprints wherever you go.
Unless you use a VPN.
Virtual private networks. Or as I'd say, paw prints. But you leave paw prints wherever you go.
Oh, I love
good, right? That. So when you go somewhere and you don't use a VPN, or you're not using an encrypted like shell, like actually encrypted shoes when you're waddling, you're trackable. People can find out who you are because they'll just look and go back to the source of the steps.
So something that is interesting is obviously even as adults with this kind of new world that we're living in with AI and things being created using ChatGPT, so like whole articles or images or whatever, it's hard as an adult to say this is real. So when I'm seeing like a video of Donald Trump, for example, saying something, I'm thinking, I don't know whether you're the same now. Everything that I see, I kind of question the authenticity of it. But imagine that as a child. It must be very hard for children to be able to discern what's real and what's fake online. And what advice do you think, like what's the solution with that?
This could be interesting what the perspective is as adults as well, when they grow up. Same as with us when we were kids. And we had a perception on like
yes, and how that will change.
How is this different to our parents? And the same with the kids as well. But they're going to move so much faster. It's like, you look at like the last century and how far we've came, and then you look at the last 10 years,
right?
How fast it's went.
Yeah, or even the last 5.
Yeah, the last 5 has been crazy. But then you look at the next 100, just try and envision it. You can't, because it's going to be so alien to what we're used to. It's not really it's kind of sad, but it's not really a human world so much anymore in terms of the world we live in, because it's very tech driven.
But do you think it'll go the other way though?
I think it already is starting to.
Because at the moment, we live in such a globalized world that when something's happening, like unfortunately with what's happening in Israel right now, we know about it instantly and it feels very personal and it feels very, I'm struggling to watch the news at the moment because it's so hideous. But I wonder whether, as things become harder to discern what's real and what's fake, will we trust what's right in front of us more and become less global? Or will there just be more authentications in place so that you know what's real?
It's going to be a lot of authentications in place. So the way the way the AI tech kind of produces the deepfake videos is you have a detective and a fraudster. And the fraudster tries to create something that's fake, and the detective looks at the real kind of images of what this is and the real videos.
I see.
And then goes, nah, it's not good enough. Go back, do it again. So it just constantly goes around the cycle until it's really, really good. That's what it's designed to do. But it's interesting because when social media came about, people started to read the news not from news outlets like, BBC News and stuff like that. They had other forums to go to. They had, Reddit, Quora, Facebook, all this kind of stuff. And then we had the discussions around misinformation and disinformation coming out of the press and then also creeping in social media. Now we're coming to a point where you won't be able to determine what's real and fake in terms of social media, but then that seeps into the judicial system as well. So like video and photographic evidence and audio evidence has been key to, proving guilt and innocence in terms of the courtroom. It has been for a long time. But there was a case in the UK a few years ago where a mother and a father were battling for custody of the child, and the mother bought an off-the-shelf AI deepfake product, ran the father's voice through it to make out that the parent was abusing the child, took her to the court, but the court picked up that it wasn't exactly right, so they dismissed her evidence. And it changed the verdict and the outcome.
Tough.
But you go, I'm not even going to say 5, I'm going to say 1 or 2 years into the future.
Yeah, I agree.
It's going to be very, very difficult for people in a courtroom to decide if something's real or not. So you're going to have, like with things now we have a GPT detector, where it detects if something's been written by GPT.
Oh, does it?
It doesn't. It doesn't. It just decides if something's
I
really
do think
well
it's quite
written.
obvious, though, to be fair.
It decides if something's really well written and then goes, okay, that's probably GPT. Because it's well written. Like, that's how it works. So like if you have a really, really bright kid or a really bright person that writes in that format because it suits them and that's how they perceive the world, everything they've written apparently is GPT generated. Because you can't tell. There's no metadata tracking the text back to GPT. It's an assumption based on the quality of the content.
That's why I wonder whether the online world will become less compelling, because like Twitter is full of bot accounts, for example, and loads of social media platforms are. If primarily the content that was on there, even posted by humans, like with Hootsuite and stuff. I used to be a social media manager, and Hootsuite are advertising services that they offer, which basically you put in your brand guidelines, you put in your services, and they automatically generate 100 social media posts. That makes me think I don't really care about what that content is when I know that a human hasn't made it. For me, the fact that a human's expertise is teaching me that is part of the reason I want to follow that account. Otherwise, I could just Google it. I don't want to be following loads of automated content. So I wonder whether it will have the opposite effect and we won't spend as much time online because it all feels kind of pointless.
It's the same. It's kind of the same. I understand where you're coming from. And in that example, I kind of agree with you in the sense of, anyone can use Microsoft Paint and paint words going, oh my God, you should buy this thing. It's great. But then someone else found Adobe and they were like, that's going to make it look way better, so I'm going to use that now. It's going to happen again.
But it's not about quality necessarily. Like, I see what you mean, but it's more about the fact that a human hasn't been involved in the process. The fact that it's automatic is my issue. Even if it looked like it had been made by a human and it was done in Paint, because that was your branding, I'd be disappointed to then learn that a computer had done it and no human had any interaction with it and it was just shoved on, pre-scheduled on Instagram. It just makes me think I'm looking at loads of filler content when the point of social media is human interaction.
It's interesting because everything you do on social media is driven by a computer doing its thing to get you to do something.
Well, it's driven by algorithms in terms of what it's presenting me with. But for example, like I love books, for example. So if I'm following authors or poets on Instagram and then I'm being shown more poets or cat videos, is also quite a prominent algorithm for me.
Dogs are better, but okay.
No, you didn't just say that on the Cyber Human podcast.
True, there's a really cute puppy
That'll be
outside,
cut out,
so,
absolutely cut out.
That's rude.
Although that's presenting me with content and all of that's automatic, a human being has thought that cat video was adorable, filmed it, uploaded it, and I've manually interacted with it. If all of that bit wasn't real, what's the point?
But then, okay, so let's look at it this way. Your podcast,
Fabulous podcast.
your first kind of fans, the people who are following you, they're people who you've met and you've shared this with them personally. You've built a relationship and you went, I'm doing this thing, you know, love for you to check it out. And then they love it because they've seen it. I think it's the same thing. So like when I come across an ad on Instagram or something and, you know, it's got like two likes on it and no comments, I'm just like, well, obviously this is going to be a really bad product because no one's peer reviewed it. No one's went,
right,
this is amazing, you should check it out. Look at my review on Trustpilot. For me, when I'm a buyer, I look at something and I go straight to the reviews because I'm going to spend money and my time, because time is something you can't get back. I'm going to make sure I'm spending it wisely. So I'll look at reviews on Google and stuff like that to make sure it's actually what.
Well, actually, that's a good example because with like Trustpilot, for example, they do make you authenticate that you are a customer. Whereas, so that must be what is going to happen in the future, is to be able to discern that it is actually a human. There will be that kind of process in place. There's
going to be a lot more human interaction in terms of this stuff to verify things. So like right now we live in a very like quick, automated, pop, pop, pop. You know, you get content come in, great, drown my brain. But now we're seeing, you know, from COVID, one of the big benefits that came out of COVID was mental health, was people actually turning around to someone else and going, are you okay, mate? Let's go for a drink and have a chat. And that's like the best cure in the world. When I had a low time, it got me through it. So when it comes to things like, you know, as kind of clinical as seeing an ad and buying a product, it's going to be the same premise. Like for most people, they're going to ask someone else and going to go, have you heard about this?
The thing is, though, you're right. Like when you say things move really quickly now, they really do. Like if I'm Googling something, for example, if I was chatting to a friend and I was saying, oh, what's the capital of this country? I would Google it, type it in, and I wouldn't even necessarily click on the first link. I'd just see what came up and say, oh, it's this one. Like I remember doing a quiz with my sister in Australia, and we were doing that all the way through. We're like, oh, I wonder what the answer is. And we weren't actually verifying that our answer was correct. We had it in a millisecond and then we moved on. And so I do think, you know, we're in this world of convenience. I think it's going to have to be an external validation thing that happens, verification. We're not going to do it because we're lazy.
Well, it's the same thing with GPT, right? I'm guilty. I use it all the time.
Yeah.
I'll turn around and go, what's the capital of Sri Lanka? Capital Sri Lanka. I ain't got a clue. I'll go on GPT and I'll just go, what's capital Sri Lanka? And it'll tell me and I'm like, great. I take it as gospel.
Right.
That is the truth. Yeah. Right? In that moment, I'm like, oh, yeah, there you go, mate. If it's something more intrinsic that I need to validate the truth, then I'll take a different approach.
Yeah, but also like with that example, with us just needing to Google the capital of a country, imagine if it's kind of like clickbaity type content. Like a huge amount of what we see is scaremongering, it's anger inducing,
it's attention.
It wants a reaction because it wants you to be looking at it and getting obsessed with the content. And so if you're instantly sharing a video that you see of Donald Trump declaring war or something, without checking whether that's, you know, it's gone viral before you've even realised that it's real.
But emotion plays into your decision, right?
Yeah.
We're humans, we're emotional, it's what we do. Everything's driven by emotion in some aspect. So like, if you hate Donald Trump, you're going to be more likely to go, share, because I hate that guy. If you like Donald Trump, you're more likely to go,
he wouldn't say
that's rubbish.
Yeah.
No, move on. If you're neutral and you haven't got an opinion because you don't really care, like me, I don't particularly care, you're going to go, oh, am I interested in this moment? Okay, a little bit. All right, I'm going to go verify this.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm interested for a minute. But, you know, it depends on the person. It depends on their perception. It depends on what they want.
Earlier, we just had a little tiny coffee break and you were chatting to my mum about the child safety stuff.
I love your mum.
And you covered, I do too. You covered some interesting topics there while I was making coffee.
So, you know, like we said earlier on about how far we've came in 100 years, 5 years, you know, how crazy that is and what we've got at our fingertips now. The education hasn't caught up in terms of its approach, like, because technology has fundamentally changed our society and changed our culture. And that's just, you know, kind of mind-boggling, but it's changed our perception of the world and how we operate and how we communicate. But the language around online safety is still really boring. It's like chicken without any seasoning. It's just plain. So, you know, for us, like, we're really keen on evolving it and changing it all the time. So it keeps pace. It needs to be trendy learning in a way to get that person's attention for a split second, because we live in an attention economy now. And one thing that we've covered in, you know, our educational stuff, but a piece that's really important when it comes to the fast-paced world and stuff is attention spans. So like the more short-form content you digest, the shorter your attention span becomes. The weaker your brain becomes at absorbing and remembering long-term and short-term memory. So they did an experiment with some kids, and they put them in a room with about 3 minutes worth of reels, and they were like, haha, happy, dopamine hit, attention on it, great, love the content. Put them into a room with something that their interests were perfectly aligned with the content, same as the reels, but it was a 3 minute long straight video. My God, the brain lit up. It was so stressed because it's having to work overtime to keep pace because they're having to remember a plot line in the story. All the bits carry on throughout that 3 minutes straight, whereas the other one was 7 to 15 seconds, story. Mm-hmm. So the brain was having to work extra because the muscle isn't used enough in terms of keeping pace and remembering stuff. So it's interesting how that works, but with that we need to be trendy in our educational content, because we're advising and trying to help people shape their brains so they don't get to that point, because you can reverse it, you can fix it, but to access those people we have to be on their level in terms of the brain health to get them to that point.
So training needs to be more interesting. I totally agree. And I think cybersecurity is the same with that. One of the issues with cybersecurity is the language. And that probably is going to be similar with AI, although I do think it's seen as a more exciting topic than cybersecurity. But we also need to consider the kind of ethics of AI. And just to finish up, what are your thoughts on that?
There's two ways of looking at AI. You're either building an individual, a child. Like right now, it's like a child. Like, you know, you're teaching it, you're training it, and you know, you're giving it a vision for the world and what it is, and you know what it could be, and all this kind of stuff. And it's a beautiful thing because we're building something that's literally on par with us as you're raising a kid, except for that kid doesn't, you know, scream and cry when it doesn't get, you know, something it wants. But it's also not adorable either. Or you can look at it in the way of like, you know, we're building something that's godlike. Like if it's this one singular system or entity that hooks into everything and it's going to make life super bloody convenient and like easy, fantastic. But it needs to be, you know, some people turn their noses up at it. Some people are really, really driven by it. But, you know, EDI, equality, diversity, inclusion, it needs to be a centerpiece. If you know, let's look at the imperial past of Europe, like, you know, countries go to a foreign country and say Africa, India, or South America or stuff like that. They take their values there. This is right and wrong. That's it. And then the native people would learn that, and that becomes part of their culture, and they assimilate that, and then they live that life, and then their, you know, descendants still go the same way. With AI now, we have a really, really great opportunity to build something that takes in people's different perspectives from around the world, like in terms of, you know, if you know, disagree or agree personally or you like on values of other people, but it's not your place to direct those people on how they live their life, because it's no one's place. So yes, if we take the example of, you know, a very traditional Catholic family and then a very liberal, you know, agnostic or atheist family, their values and traditions and what they perceive as right and wrong will be very contrasting to each other. Some aspects will be quite similar, but overall very different lifestyles. So if we're going to have an AI solution that serves both audiences, it needs to be adaptable to both. It needs to be able to encompass both perspectives and value them both the same without harming themselves or getting them to harm each other.
But I think that's the difficulty of the world that we live in at the moment. We live in such a polarized society where people can't see each other's perspective. We've got the extreme left, the extreme right, and I do think social media platforms are massively making that the case. And you're right, with AI, people are going to be kicking off and saying, you know, my child's being fed really conservative propaganda, and someone else is going to say this kind of LGBT friendly vegan is too much. And so like you've got people, as you say, with completely different perspectives on what they're happy with their children's being fed. And I don't think we're at a place where people can just accept other people's lifestyles right now. No. I wonder whether we're going to get to a kind of explosion point because it's so polarized right now, and then we're going to settle back down again, because it does feel so like
kettle's boiling, right?
Yeah.
One shoe size doesn't fit all.
No.
It's going to be it's a lovely but pipe dream to have one AI that fits all.
Right.
That, kind of encompasses. It's possible if you have the right people behind it and enough money to do it. Great, but and these data scientists that sit in these rooms that go through the research that train these models, I would say hands down, probably 99% of them are in it for the right reasons. They genuinely think this is going to change the world and make the world a better place, and I bloody well hope it does.
I think it will. I think it already has. I think AI is something that's got pros and cons.
But from your perspective, yes.
Right.
However, you go to... So there's a study came out on ChatGPT, the first official study on its perspective in terms of political leanings. And it was a UK-based study, and they found that it leaned slightly left. Okay. So it would be in favour of Labour, it would be in favour of Joe Biden as president and all that kind of stuff. So from a conservative values side, if you're a conservative person, you turn around and go, well, that's harmful to society because it doesn't include my views equally to yours. So you'd see it as harmful, so it's not good in that sense. That's deemed as harmful to that person. Now, if they've got kids and that child's using that platform like GPT, and they've read in the news that that's not good with me, not good for my child, then from their angle, it's harming their values and their child. Okay. And that's a problem because it's, again, one shoe size is not going to fit all.
So with any parents that are listening to this or people who are concerned about what children are looking at online, what one piece of advice would you give them other than download Digital Worth?
Get learning. Keep looking at different perspectives. Like, whether you disagree with it or not, you've got to kind of remove, like these days especially, you have to remove the emotional bias that we all intrinsically have and look at something from multiple angles. Like, it's difficult because we're constantly fed stuff real quick and, like you said, convenience. And
also the news is quite scary and quite negative. So if I was a parent, what sources would I be looking at to be learning?
It depends on your value structure. It depends on what you want to know.
Okay, so just look at a broad range of...
Yeah, because I'm not right, but from my perspective, I'm also not wrong. So, from a mum's perspective, like my mum, she'll sit down in the evening with a dog and a partner, and she'll put on BBC Southwest, and she gets the news from there. I personally am like, well, it's not my cup of tea. I'd rather go on GPT and use...
Really? Wow, is that where you get your news?
Well, I leverage it, but then I'll use social media... not social media, like search engines to go and browse and find out things. Like, if I want to know what's going on in China, I'll go to Google, I'll click on the news tab, and I type in China. And then I'll go through 10 pages worth of different stories from multiple sources like Al Jazeera, BBC, Sky News, NBC, and you get the full picture because they're all, in some manner, biased in their own way because they all have a perspective on something. So I get the full picture. It doesn't affect me, personally, because, someone's going to drop a bomb. It's kind of going to happen. But I'm interested.
So, to wrap up, I always ask my guests to recommend something to our listeners. So it doesn't have to be cyber related. It can be something that you've been to see, something that you're reading, watching, listening to.
I mean, I'm a big nature lover, but a book I'd recommend is The Brain by David Eagleman.
Okay.
Really interesting read. I couldn't put it down. It explores a lot about the mindset and perspective and how far you can go to make someone numb to what you consider to be absolutely abhorrent. It's very interesting.
Interesting.
It's very interesting.
Well, my recommendation this month is an artist called Sahila Sokanvari, who I saw at the Literature Festival. She's an Iranian artist who was formerly a scientist, and she always wanted to be an artist. And I went to the most amazing talk by her where she talked about women's history in Iran and about kind of compulsory veiling and then compulsory Western outfits and now back to compulsory veiling with the kind of political landscape that's happening right now with women cutting their hair off and things and the awful things that are happening there. But it was hugely educational. I felt like I didn't know so much about the history of Iran and women, and she presents this through her artwork. So really gorgeous images of celebrities from Iran. And it was just such an amazing story, and I want to promote her. So anyone who's interested in that, I would really recommend checking her out. She's a very interesting person. But thank you so much for joining me today, Adam.
Cheers for having me.
You're very welcome. And thanks for listening, guys. So yeah, do remember to subscribe. We've got some amazing guests coming up. And thank you for listening. Bye.